And we are back. Um, I don't know. Well, one, we have to acknowledge the consistency. I think I'm sure you guys are sensing it, and sitting here like recording. I too can recognize that we've been consistent, and I like that for us. Um, yeah, we're gonna start off how we always start off, an exercise in mindfulness. Focus on your breath. 10 breaths starting now. Now that we're here, I have a brain teaser for you. What has a neck but no head, two arms but no hands? Um, I remember in a previous episode, I always like not sure whether to call these episodes or what to call them, but in a previous conversation we had around creativity was this idea of finding your creative identity and almost like your fingerprint, and that you can recognize that fingerprint in your work, in all the things that you produce. And I think for a lot of us, we have that. We have a creative identity. You can see when it's us, when it's our creation, what we sound like. We have a certain like taste and feel, and if somebody is around us enough or consume our art enough, they too can pick up one when it's yours. And there's this there's this question that it's asked, and it almost feels like the chicken before the egg. Do you find yourself or your identity before your creativity, or do you find your identity through your creativity? And I've been sitting with this question, and what I realize is that like two things can be true at the exact same time, and that's the dichotomy of like just human existence in general. But the thing that I've been thinking about, and just this idea of finding your identity and then seeing your identity across your work, it's I don't know that as human beings we're monoliths. I don't think we have a monolithic existence. Our experiences aren't, for sure. They are not, and it differs on a daily basis. The way we interact, who we interact with, and that can shape and mold us. And I think our creativity and the art that comes from it is a reflection of those experiences that are not singular. And if that is true, that means that our creative identity isn't just one thing, it could be multiple things. Which kind of led me to think about this, down this line of thought, that what if in creativity you don't necessarily find this singular identity that exists. It is not this one version, this one creative version of you. What if what creativity is and what it does, it allows you to see the multitude of personalities, the complexity in being, and the variation that exists in your creative expressions? What if creativity is a conversation with self, the different versions of you that exist? And I say that because there's a version of you that exists outside of creativity where you have to fit the mold. One of the things I said, especially when I talk about creativity, is it's inherent to us as human beings, and we spend our adult life. Adulthood separates us from it because we have to conform to this social existence, and conform to what society wants us to be. But the more we are able to reconnect and find our creativity, it's almost like finding ourselves. But we as human beings aren't singular. Like, we are not, yes, we are individuals, but there's not just one version of us. There's a saying that says, if somebody tells you something about me, or a characteristic or a trait about me, even if it seems far-fetched or not like me, believe them, because they've seen a version of me and they've triggered that version of me. And you may have not triggered that version of me, but that version of me does exist. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not the version that they see, because again, we are layered human beings, and there's some level of complexity. And I think what creativity does, it allows us to experience the complexity that comes with being human. And there's an emotional aspect in creativity, and emotions are fleeting. They can change. They can be sporadic. They can be unconscious. They can be deliberate. And I feel like in all of those feelings, they might trigger a different form or a different aspect of your creativity. And one of the things that I appreciate about creativity is when unfiltered and without limits, it almost feels pure. And I think creativity allows us to explore the different versions of ourselves. Creativity allows us to realize that there's not just one version that exists. It allows us to recognize who we are under different circumstances. It allows us to be able to showcase and lean into those aspects of ourselves that we may have suppressed in normal life. It allows us to explore the boundaries that may exist in our heads. It allows us to challenge our own thoughts. Creativity allows us to fail when the world might not allow us to. When there's consequences for failures outside of creativity, we see creativity as refuge. And I don't think, I know for a fact that we live in a world with limits. And creativity allows us to extend beyond those limits. So as much as it is an outlet, I think it is a mirror, a reflection. It almost feels like, what do they call when you go to those, like the carnival or the fair, and then the maze mirror, where when all these mirrors in a room, and they're like tilted and angled in different ways, but when you walk in, you see like multiple versions of yourself. I want to say that's what it feels like when when we say that creativity, your creativity is a reflection of self. Some of those mirrors are trick mirrors. Some are distorted, but it's you. It is a reflection of you, a version of you that exists, and that is a really good analogy and I guess a representation of it. Now that I'm thinking about it, there's an elongated version of you. There's a short version. There's a tall version. There's a small. There's a large. There's a thin. There's a wide. But they are all versions of you. And sometimes you're allowed creativity. Not sometimes. Creativity allows you to be able to see yourself in that way. I think our perception of self is one way, and everybody else perceives us differently. And the creative process and creative outputs allow us to see the different versions of ourselves. Because in that moment, I think as judgmental as we can possibly be, I think we're less judgy when we're being creative. At least not in the process, because we never know where creativity is going to lead us. We don't know the output. We might judge the output, the process itself, like we allow ourselves to kind of take risks. We'll explore boundaries. We're going to live in the fringes and figure out the spaces that I can occupy and what I can and can't do. We might challenge ourselves. We might do things that are maybe unorthodox or in exploration or in curiosity. Tinker with certain things. Use different elements. Introduce tools that we may or may not have considered before. Toy a bit with our process. And just allowing this continuous evolution of the creative process. And at the end of it, art comes from it. And that art is a reflection of us. But I would argue that I don't know that two pieces are identical. Because if we allow all this variation to happen during the creative process, then those variations are going to show themselves. The little nuances are going to be detectable in the end product. And I think it's like going back to the earlier thought that you can in fact find yourself in creativity. But I don't know that it's the same version of yourself that you find each time. And you'd be surprised of the different versions of you that exist within you. And I can also argue that you will stumble upon newer versions of yourself the more creative you are. And the more creative you allow yourself to be. And I think that is one of the things that is fascinating and interesting about creativity and the creative process is you never know where this is going to end up. You never know truly what is going to happen next. And I think about certain artists, music artists, who toyed with sounds and who came into music with a particular sound and achieved some level of success, but it almost felt like a bubble. And they spent time just in exploration, in creative exploration, and they stumbled upon a new sound. And if they're lucky enough, a sound that they can take ownership of, in a sense of it's associated with them because it was so unique and never experienced before, that it now becomes not only their sound, and the rest of the world wants to replicate it. And that is the thing that catapults them to stardom or success. And then the dilemma that they face is this version of them isn't necessarily their final form. And then they find themselves trying to replicate that thing. And this is where I'm saying that your creative identity isn't one thing. And it becomes difficult when you try to replicate that experience, when you try to replicate that output. It doesn't feel natural anymore. It doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel real. And I think that is the challenge. It's a challenge for a lot of creatives, because here you are thinking that you had a sound, you had a creative identity, and you struck gold while exploring your creative range. And then now there's this new identity that you're associated with. Then you feel this pressure to be stuck here instead of allowing the creative process to evolve and take you to another version of yourself. And there's no guarantees that this new identity, this new creative identity, is going to have mass appeal or achieve the same level of success as the one before it. But again, there's beauty in that. There's beauty in continuously finding new versions of yourself. There's beauty in embracing that. I think it's beautiful to not know who you are and continue to find yourself in your creativity. There's beauty in stumbling upon newer versions of yourself. I think we should take pride and find happiness in the fact that when we watch or see or produce art that seems heterogeneous, that don't look all the same, that when stand next to each other almost feels like stark contrasts. They just feel different. And one is not closer to you than the other. One is not more you than the other. I would argue that they're both you. They're different versions of you that coexist. And that is beautiful. I think creativity is a conversation with self that forces you to not be the same. It is that voice that says, be different. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to go against your own thoughts. You're allowed to pull a 180. And in doing so, are still you. And you should be okay with that. I think you should actually embrace that and take pride in this chameleon nature that exists in you, this chameleon characteristic, to be able to morph and shapeshift. So truly, it's not about finding your creativity or finding your, I want to make sure I'm saying this right. Truly, it's not about finding your identity in your creativity. It's more about allowing creativity to help you explore all the identities that exist within you. All right, I'm not going to extend this more than it needs to be extended. What has a neck but no head, 2 arms but no hands? A shirt. Go be great.